What's the P on the we on the we gon' collect the E on the T on the D on we next. T on the we on the flat, the C's on the heat on the we on the flat, but I'm
What's good, homies? It's your boy K-Spot. You know what I'm saying? Hey yo, so today I'm checking out Swag Kage. You know what I'm saying? He got this video called How Strong is Kakashi? And he has two of them, you know what I'm saying? He got How Strong is Kakashi based on part 1. I'm not gonna watch that one because you know I know how strong he is, you know what I'm saying? Shippuden, I need to know. This is the one that I want to check out, you know what I'm saying? And I'm especially curious about how strong he is after he lost his Sharingan in the 4th war. You know what I'm saying? He lost that shit, but somehow he was still strong enough to be a Kage, you know what I'm saying? So I really want to, yeah, he was strong enough to be the 6th, and he didn't even have his Sharingan, you know what I'm saying? And pretty much, like, he was known for his Sharingan, you know what I'm saying? He was known as the copy ninja, you know what I'm saying? So without the Sharingan, you know what I'm saying? They say the only move that he has in his arsenal that he hasn't copied is the lightning blade. And I guess his summoning jutsu with the dogs and all that shit. Which is a pretty weak jutsu, you know what I'm saying? It's a pretty weak summoning, you know what I'm saying? It's not that strong. But then again, he's strong enough to be a Kage, and we haven't seen post Sharingan Kakashi in action, really. You know what I'm saying? I wonder what Swag Kage is gonna say about this. Maybe he has something that, cause my Naruto knowledge is on point. Don't get it twisted. You know what I'm saying? Naruto's my favorite anime of all time. It's the first anime I ever watched. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm curious to see what he got to say about, you know, Kakashi, how strong he is. I mean, he is fucking strong, you know what I'm saying? He was a fucking Kage. But anyways, oh yeah, Boruto, I haven't watched like the last 20 episodes because I dropped that shit, you know what I'm saying? I gave up, you know what I'm saying? The only reason I watched it for so long is because of how much I love Naruto. Because in the beginning, you know, it was pretty good, you know what I'm saying? The whole thing with his eye and shit, you know what I'm saying? That got me hooked. But then all of a sudden they just stopped talking about it. And then it was pretty shit. I was giving up. Oh yeah, and then they had that fight with Sakura and Shin Uchiha, which is pretty hype actually. So that kept me there, you know what I'm saying? And then I started giving up again. And then we had the fight of the year, the anime fight of the year, Naruto and Sasuke vs Momoshiki. That shit was fire. That shit saved the show, you know what I'm saying? For a few weeks, and then I dropped it. I finally gave up, you know what I'm saying? But anyways, I don't want to keep this intro too long. I want to get straight to it because it's a 15-minute video we're checking out. So, yeah. Let's go.
Hey, how's everybody doing today? Swag Kage here, and welcome to today's video. So last time we took a look at Kakashi before the time skip, and I didn't have much to say in that video. Most of my focus was directed at how much weaker he feels in part 1, if only because, aside from narrative inconsistency, there doesn't seem to be much of a reason for him to have gotten as much stronger as he did between parts 1 and 2. But in this video, I have a lot more information to work with. We get to see Kakashi fight a lot more, he makes use of a much wider variety of skills and jutsu. It's just a much easier subject to cover. So first, let's take a look at his fight with Naruto and Sakura. Now, the version of this fight that we choose to use will sort of impact our perception of Kakashi, and that's because in the anime, there's a lot of filler fluff inserted, I assume, to make the fight longer. Not that the intent really matters, but what is important
I remember
is
the first time seeing this shit.
A little bit stronger in the anime than he does in the manga. Now, to be fair, you could easily
I miss
argue that these
Naruto,
differences are negligible, so I won't spend too much time talking about them. But the biggest one is that in the anime, the fight is quite a bit longer than it is in the manga, and this is only important because Kakashi leaves his Sharingan exposed the entire time in both versions, and so if you're watching the anime, it's easier to interpret this as a sign that he's at least partially overcome his Sharingan fatigue issues. There are some other minor differences present in the anime version of the fight, nothing too big. He uses a couple extra jutsu, like the Water Dragon Jutsu and the Primary Lotus, but he doesn't do anything that I think is important enough to focus on. Now, that said, if you are interested, I'd recommend checking out both the anime and manga manga versions of this fight back to back, so you can see
I do
some
not
of the
read
differences I'm
mangas, bro.
talking about. But even if there were any super substantial ones, they wouldn't really matter because anime filler is non-canon, so it's sort of whatever. The only reason I brought it up in the first place, though, is in the manga version of the fight, we don't really learn anything about Kakashi. The fight's only about a chapter long, and even then, a good portion of the chapter is just Naruto, Sakura, and Kakashi talking to each other. So if we want to find any signs of how much stronger he's gotten, we're gonna have to look elsewhere. His fight with Itachi's 30% clone doesn't tell us much, but during he and Naruto's confrontation with Deidara, we learned that he has a Mangekyo Sharingan, which is obviously a pretty big deal. Now, what's funny about this is his Mangekyo Sharingan is treated the same way in this arc as his regular Sharingan was treated back in the Land of Waves. He only uses Kamui a couple of times on Deidara, and even still, it takes a big enough toll on him that he's stuck in the hospital for the entire next arc.
True.
So even though he doesn't seem to suffer any negative side effects from using his Sharingan for long periods of time anymore, his new ultimate move has all of the same old drawbacks anyway. As a matter of fact, these side effects are actually quite a bit worse, because at the very least, in the Land of Waves, Kakashi was up and ready to go by the time he was needed to fight again. But after using his Mangekyo Sharingan, he's knocked out of commission for a while. We don't see him in action again until Hidan and Kakazu show up. Now, all that said, Kamui is still pretty serious business, so the fact that Kakashi can use it at all is, by itself, enough to make him stronger than he was in Part 1. Had he used this jutsu against Zabuza, he would have won that fight immediately. There would have been no back and forth, none of that. Now, it is important to keep in mind that Kakashi isn't great at using Kamui yet. He can't fully control the size or the position of the portal, but as we're shown, that doesn't change the fact that this is the most impactful jutsu he has in his arsenal. He essentially forces Deidara to retreat by sniping his arm off, and he also saves both Team 7 and Team 10 from being killed by Deidara's fake suicide bomb later in the same fight. So even at its least refined, whether it's used offensively or defensively, it's pretty effective at accomplishing whatever Kakashi has in mind. Anyway, the next two fights he participates in are first against Hidan and Kakazu, and second against two of the Six Paths of Pain. He doesn't do much in the fight against Hidan and Kakazu, he just wipes out one of Kakazu's hearts, and that's about it. But his performance in his fight against Pain is something that I'd actually like to talk about.
Pain did fuck him up, though.
Kakazu's performance doesn't seem super impressive. I'd actually argue that he did about as well against the Paths of Pain as Jiraiya did, and that's because he was forced to fight the two strongest. Aside from the Animal Path, the Diva Path and the Asura Path are significantly stronger than any of the other Paths of Pain. And even then, I'd argue that the Animal Path is still weaker than both of them. The Asura Path ripped off one of Jiraiya's arms with a single surprise attack, for example, and the Diva Path kind of speaks for itself, and yet Kakashi was almost able to wipe them both out by himself. He did destroy the Asura Path, and with a little bit of help from Choji and Choza, came very close to taking out the Diva Path as well, but was stopped by a last-second interception from the Asura Path. And now I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, Swag, what are you doing comparing Kakashi to Jiraiya here? Jiraiya fought all six Paths of Pain, but that's not necessarily true. It's technically true that Jiraiya fought the six Paths of Pain at the same time, but he made no progress towards victory against them. For most of his fight against Pain, he was fighting either just the Animal Path or a team composed of the Animal
But the thing
Path,
is, Jiraiya
Human
didn't know
Path, and
much
the
about
Prey
the
Path,
Pains
with
at that
two of
point.
these three being among the weakest of the entire group. As soon as the rest of the Paths of Pain showed up, it became very clear that Jiraiya stood no chance against them. And like I said earlier, the Asura Path immediately took off one of his arms with a
Kakashi and them had a little bit of knowledge about Pain,
combating the Diva Path's ability to manipulate fundamental forces. And yeah, sure, maybe he'd have been able to figure out a way to corner it, especially considering how much weaker Pain was after blowing up the Leaf Village with Shinra Tensei, but it's also pretty easy to argue the opposite. Regardless of what you think, though, I think it's pretty crazy that Kakashi did so well in this fight that you can compare him to Jiraiya in the first place, and it's a pretty clear sign that he's made a whole lot of progress since Part 1. His prowess with Kamui also improved significantly between the Kazekage Rescue arc and the Pain Invasion arc, as demonstrated when he manages to teleport a
missile
at him by fucking Shinra Tensei, and shortly afterwards when he manages to teleport a missile moving at full speed towards Choji. His chakra pool also seems to have expanded at least a little bit, since he manages to use multiple elemental jutsu, including an Earth-style Earth Wall, multiple uses of Raikiri, and a Lightning Release clone shortly before using Kamui 2 times in a row. And while this pales in comparison to the sorts of Kamui and Lightning Release spam that he pulls off in the War Arc, it's pretty impressive for Kakashi considering his previously established limits. While Kakashi doesn't seem to have grown very much, speaking purely in terms of physical strength, he's definitely become a far more capable fighter since the beginning of the series. His ability to use Kamui, his larger chakra supply and his wider arsenal of jutsu all make him feel quite a bit more threatening than he did before. Now, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that early Shippuden Kakashi is Kage level, but he's certainly a few pegs above Jonin level. Even though at this point he was nowhere close to being one of Naruto's top tiers, he was still pretty strong and was absolutely a respectable fighter. Like Shikamaru, he made up for many of his weaknesses with his insane intellect and tactical skills, and he was able to outsmart pretty much everyone he fought. Now, that doesn't change the fact that he doesn't beat anybody. He doesn't win a single one of the fights that he participates in, and what makes this look even worse is the fact that he is often backed up by a small to medium-sized team of other ninja. And now, to be totally fair, his teammates often aren't the greatest. Like, in a fight against people like Kakazu and Pain, it's hard to expect somebody like Choji to be of much help, but still, considering how many crazy jutsu he has at his disposal and how smart he is, you'd expect him to come away from at least one of these fights with a victory. And so the fact that he is consistently unable to, even with the assistance of multiple teammates, it's definitely a little bit weird. Now, this probably has something to do with the fact that he is constantly forced to fight the main antagonist of the current arc. He fights Deidara, Kakazu, and Pain, and he probably would have been forced to fight Sasuke if he had gone with Team Yamato to Orochimaru's hideout. And these are obviously all very powerful characters. They're the main antagonist of the arc for a reason. Not to mention, they all have pretty thick plot armor, since in the cases of Kakazu and Pain, Naruto had to, for narrative purposes, be the one to take both of them out. Now, I'm not saying that Kakashi would have been able to win any of these fights without these narrative barriers, but considering who his opponents were, I also don't think it's fair to discredit him just because he constantly loses. Everybody agrees, for example, that Vegeta is really strong, and of course, Kakashi isn't the Vegeta of the series. I mean, it's pretty obvious who that is, but the point is, just because he loses most of the fights that he participates in and doesn't beat anybody of real importance, that doesn't take away from the fact that he's really strong, and even if he couldn't beat most of the characters in the series, at least the ones introduced up to this point, he'd still be able to perform pretty well against them. Anyway, before I provide my final thoughts on early Shippuden Kakashi and move on to War Arc Kakashi, let's take a quick look at his accomplishments throughout the 5 Kage Summit Arc. Now, to be totally honest, you could completely skip this section and not miss out on anything of real significance, but I don't want to get a ton of comments from people being like, oh, but Swag, you didn't talk about the 5 Kage Summit. But anyway, he doesn't really fight anybody in this arc. His only major fight is against Sasuke, and that fight isn't super long. The main takeaway from it is it wasn't even really a fight. The idea of fighting against Susanoo. Like, based on the look on his face right here, if Sasuke's Mangekyo hadn't pooped out on him at the last second, Kakashi probably would have died in this fight. But, you know, they fought each other after Sasuke had just gotten through fighting all 5 Kage back-to-back, so Sasuke obviously wasn't in tippity-top shape at this point. Anyway, I'd like to bring everybody's attention to this panel right here, where Kakashi says to himself, after using Kamui once, that he's not feeling so great afterwards. I just think it's kind of relevant since this happens right before the War Arc, which we are about to start talking about.
During the arc, he became strong as shit.
Anyway, so how strong is early Shippuden Kakashi? His strength is pretty consistent. Obviously, he gets progressively more powerful, and there is a pretty clear curve that he travels across throughout this chunk of the series. So by the time the 5 Kage Summit rolls around, he does seem to have gotten significantly more powerful than he was at the beginning of Shippuden, but he isn't unrecognizably stronger. It's still pretty easy to compare both versions of Kakashi to one another. Like I said earlier in the video, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that he's Kage level, but by the time that he reaches the end of this curve, I think it's pretty safe to say that he is. If not, he's definitely at the very top of Jonin level, like right on the cusp of Kage level. And I think it's pretty easy to argue that there are multiple Kage level opponents that he'd be able to beat. The 2 easiest examples, in my opinion, being the 4th Kazekage and the 5th Mizukage. Now, in the 4th War, Kakashi is obviously ridiculous. I've talked about this multiple times in the past, and it's not because of any significant increase in his physical capabilities or whatever, though there certainly seems to be at least a small one, but instead it's because in the War Arc, it seems like Kakashi is unable to run out of chakra. No matter how hard he tries, it seems like Kakashi is simply unable to exhaust his chakra supply. He fights for multiple days straight, uses dozens of elemental jutsu, and uses Kamui more times than I care to count. Now this does seem to be due, at least in some small part, to him receiving chakra from Naruto and Kurama later on in the war, but still, based on what we see of him before this point, it's pretty clear that his stamina before the war was nothing compared to what it was during it. Something minor that I'd like to cover real quick is we get a pretty clear representation of how much stronger he's gotten since the beginning of the series when we see him fight Zabuza and Haku again. Kakashi wraps things up right away, and you could chalk this up to Zabuza being weaker because of him being an Edo Tensei, but I don't think it's too far-fetched to assume that it also has something to do with Kakashi being way stronger than he was when they first fought. So this is a pretty clear indication that he has in fact been getting as much stronger over the course of the series as I've been saying he has throughout these two videos. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating about how much stronger he gets in the war, I guess I can't blame you, especially if you haven't watched the series in a while, but I promise I'm not doing anything to stretch the truth. Like, Kakashi goes from struggling to fight Deidara at the beginning of Shippuden to charging headfirst into a fight against 5 Biju and fighting on par with 7th Gate Guy, who is strong enough to take out Kisame. I don't want to spend too much time talking about how crazy he is during the Fourth War because I'm worried I'll start sounding redundant. Plus, I've spent plenty of time covering this topic in many of the videos I've made in the past. But what I will say is, at this point in the series, Kakashi has easily surpassed Kage level and could without a doubt go toe-to-toe with multiple Kage level opponents. He still isn't top-tier material. He certainly couldn't beat War Arc Obito, Madara, or Hashirama by himself. And even though he did beat Obito in a fight, that fight took place under pretty wacky circumstances. Like, for instance, Obito wasn't able to use Kamui to phase through Kakashi's attacks, and that's kind of his whole thing. So I imagine it was pretty difficult for him to adapt to fighting under those conditions. Not to mention, it seemed like Obito kind of threw the fight because he wanted Kakashi to slam a Raikiri.
This was one of my favorite fights, bro.
Madara placed on his heart. So for the few of you who are going to be like, man, Swag, you're downplaying him. He beat Obito. You know, just consider all
definitely my favorite hand-to-hand
anyway, this is the part
combat
of the
fight of all time.
About Susanoo Kakashi, but even though he only shows up for a very brief chunk of the manga, I think that there are enough variables and hypotheticals surrounding.
Yeah, at this point he was strong as shit.
Video, so I'll probably revisit Kakashi at some point in the future and discuss how strong I think he is with 6-path chakra and both of Obito's Sharingan. Until next time, though, that's going to be all from me. So thanks as always for watching.
Hey yo, this video was pretty on point, but damn, he didn't reach to where I want him to reach. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't get to that point. You know, post Sharingan, Kakashi. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to know, is there any? If y'all know, is there any kind of material that shows Kakashi doing anything? You know, without the Sharingan, or you know what I'm saying, or as a Kage? I'm really curious to know. You know what I'm saying? I might have to check out the manga if there's anything in the manga. There's probably not. Probably like, I don't know, if there's some material out there that explains or shows anything, then just let me know and I'll check it out. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. Yeah, but that was a pretty good video. I see you got other videos as strong as Itachi. I gotta check that one out, bro. Itachi's a... Bro, that nigga is strong as shit, bro. You know what I'm saying? And I can only imagine how strong his homie was. You know what I'm saying? The one who died. What was his name? Shisui? Bro, these Uchihas are something else, bro. But anyways, yeah, I got nothing else to say. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. Leave your comments. Subscribe. Get me to 400 subscribers. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's me, your boy K-Spot.
What's the we on the we gon' collect.
Ma!